Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm still a little bit under the weather, so excuse me if my voice sounds a little bit off, but we will make it through this, and I don't feel that awful, not awful enough where I can't work on things. So with that in mind, we are going to continue working on the Yamaha. Now, the last video with this thing, we went ahead and reworked the hot side components. So modified the center section of the exhaust as well as the recirculated wastegate dump to play nice with the new exhaust manifold. So we have those two things completed, and today we are going to work on the cold side and get the intake tube and the blow-off valve recirculation wrapped up and tailored for this new manifold and this new setup. So I have this old section from the previous turbo system that I'll need to scavenge this flange and this section of tubing off of this larger section. I have to scavenge this stub, and then I have these smaller pieces of tubing here that I should be able to make work for the new recirculation. So I guess the first thing that we need to do is to go over and to cut this stub off of this piece of tubing here. And once we have that completed, we can go ahead and start figuring out the angles and the cuts and everything that we need to apply to this new stuff to make it fit the way that it needs to. I will also need to clean this old recirculation hole that ended up a little bit hodgepodged when I cut the old recirculation provision off of it. Just needs to be cleaned up with the carbide and just tailored up a little bit, churched up a little bit rather, so that way it makes it a little bit easier to weld the new recirculation provision onto it. So I guess without further ado, let's go ahead, go over, cut this stub off of this piece of 2.5-inch tubing, and we can go ahead and keep moving forward, or I guess begin moving forward with this rebuild. Now, with a little bit of angle grinder work and some belt sander coping, we have a pretty decent fit with this recirc provision onto a piece of 2.5-inch tubing. So I can go ahead now and go back over to the YXZ, figure out exactly where this needs to lie on that compressor outlet stub, or not stub, but the compressor outlet extension that I welded onto the compressor cover. And you can get this marked out, figure out where I need to pop the hole in it, get the hole popped, and get this thing welded onto it. Back over here, I guess when I re-angled the turbo a little bit, you can see a bit of a misalignment with this, oh god, that's bright, with the compressor outlet extension and the inlet of the intercooler. So I think what I'm going to do is pull that compressor cover off, cut that housing extension off of the housing, re-angle it, or yeah, re-angle it, regrind it, do whatever, realign it to make it fit a little bit more appropriately for what we have going on here. Then re-weld it to the compressor outlet, and I'll be a little bit happier at that point if everything sits perfectly in line. The old setup, it sat a little bit off as well. It worked perfectly fine, but while I'm in here, if I am remaking and reworking these parts, why not take the extra 10 or 15 minutes to do this correctly as opposed to just letting it go and always having that bother me at the back of my mind. So I'll pop these few bolts off for these retention plates for the compressor cover, pull that off, get it cut, and we can figure out the re-angling and everything else. And here you can see why I want to rework this. That is off a lot, not even close. To get it somewhat close, I mean, it would have to sit all the way down there, and even then it's a good inch off from where it actually needs to be. So definitely the right call to pop that off, to make this cut, and to make this, to tailor it a little bit more to where it actually needs to be. So I'll pull this housing, make the cut, do this weld for a third time at this point, all things considered. First time with the first kit, second time what we had before we re-angled the turbo, and third time now that we have everything really where it needs to be. So let's go over, make this cut, and do whatever grinding and fitting needs to be done on this compressor outlet, make it fit how it needs to, and we will be cooking with fire at that point. Alright, now we have our new compressor outlet extension welded onto the compressor cover. So let's head back over to the YXZ and we can test fit it. See if I can one-hand this and not completely smack the compressor wheel. Which, there, we're good to go. And let me grab my light. And it fits just as well as it needs to. And it's right in line with our intercooler inlet. All is well there. No manifold clearance issues, no stupid issues of any sort. It fits and it isn't 1 inch or whatever it was off of the off plane from that intercooler inlet. So very happy with that. And at this point we are finally ready to begin figuring out where the blow-off valve is going to live at. So in order to do that, I need to put the pinch clamps back on the compressor cover to hold it in place a little bit more firmly, and then we can put the intake tube on and figure out roughly where we are going to end up with our blow-off valve provision. So let me I guess set you guys down, and I can get to that, and we can keep rolling right along with this project. We now have the blow-off valve recirculation provision put on the compressor covered assembly here. So it's welded up, obviously the holes punched in it and all of that. And now we need to put the blow-off valve onto its respective flange here. So gasket wise, I'm going to use some RTV for it, and just wanted to make a quick note about putting RTV or using RTV as a gasket. Many times less is more, if that makes sense. You don't need to absolutely glob RTV all over a flange like this, especially one where there is like this little port right here and what have you. So what I will do is squeeze some out on my finger, and RTV has been sitting for a little while, but I'll smear it around this way to get a nice thin layer in place, because like I said, we don't need a ton of it. And let's make sure we have even coating all the way around. Put a little bit more on that side. we are. Nice RTV gasket, and I'm sure that you guys can put the pieces together logically if you haven't used RTV before. But just to reiterate, this RTV, it's a liquid silicone gasket, and as it gets clamped down, like when you bolt pieces together, like what we're about to do here, that RTV has to go somewhere, and it will squeeze, and you really don't want it to squeeze in such a manner that it squeezes into ports and orifices that you really don't want or need it in. So like I said, less is more, and that sums up that. So I'll go ahead, tighten the blow-off valve down now, and there we are. So you might be able to see just a little bead of RTV poking out. It's really all that you want. If you're squeezing out like a 1/4-inch bead as you're tightening the thing down, you probably use too much. So I'll let this tack up and dry for a little bit, and then we can get started with reintegrating this piece of tubing into the intake tube. I did a little bit of off-camera work here, getting the turbo back together and getting it reattached to the intercooler. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see, maybe up through there. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to jam the camera in there, but all of the pinch clamps are tightened down, turbo's in place, all of that's good. The 2 T-bolt clamps are connected from the compressor outlet into the intercooler. Blow-off valves on, as you guys obviously saw me tighten that down on the bench talking about proper RTV application. But now I went ahead and I modified this little tube here that I think will end up being our not wastegate, but our blow-off valve recirculation. So we slide it into the coupler here, and you can't really even here without the camera I can't see a whole lot, so a lot of this is done just based off of feel. But you can see up in there, looks like it fits pretty nicely. It feels like it fits pretty nicely, feeling around with fingers in there. But I guess I can go ahead now. I can mark out where that recirc tube wants to be. I can get a hole popped in the intake tube, get that welded on, and then I have to patch up that pre-existing hole from the old blow-off valve recirculation, and at that point we are good to go, other than just reattaching that vacuum line for the blow-off valve. So I guess let me go ahead. I'll do that off camera. I do what I just said off camera, as like I said, it's very difficult to get the camera in to see this, but I'll get it marked out. I can pull the tube out, and then we can see on camera the hole punching process and wrapping this up. There we have the new recirculation tube and the patch over the hole for the old recirculation tube. Now, this certainly is not the prettiest work that I've ever done, but to be frank, this tube on this vehicle stands a very high chance of getting beat up and or destroyed. So I'm not super worried about making it the prettiest part that I've ever built. It's structurally sound, which is my main concern, and it fits where it needs to fit, which is another big concern. So I guess let's go ahead and I can get this reinstalled on the YXZ, get the filter put back on, and that vacuum line attached to the blow-off valve, and then this project will be a wrap. the YXZ is all back together finally. So again, you probably can't, you won't be able to see as much detail as I wish you could, but we have our recirculation tube all welded up. Mates up nicely to the blow-off valve. Everything's clamped down. I have the vacuum line reattached to the blow-off valve. All the oil lines are tight. All clamps are tight. All bolts are tight. Everything's tight and ready to go. So we're not going to take this thing out today. With me feeling a little bit under the weather and other things that I have on my agenda for the day, I'm not going to do that at this point in time, but that will be coming very shortly, as this thing's been sitting for quite a while. It deserves to have a little bit of love thrown its way, and I feel kind of bad that it's just been sitting and not being used to any of its potential, let alone its full potential. But we'll cross that bridge in the near future. But for right now, she's going to sit for a few more days. But at least it's all back together and it's ready for me to hook the laptop back up, to play around with the tune a little bit more, and to finally get it back out to enjoy it for what I purchased it for. So with all that being said, and with this project being wrapped up, or re-wrapped up, however you want to look at it, I'd like to thank you guys, as always, for sticking around, watching me work on these oddball projects that I have going on around here, listening to me drone on, so on and so forth. But you guys are awesome. You guys keep me going, and I can't say how much I appreciate you. So with that being said, it's going to be the end of this video. And until next time, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys then.